Looking at my wedding dress hanging in the closet, I never imagined that 9 years later, someone else's wedding would become the moment my entire family finally understood what they had lost. But let me start from the beginning, when I was 18 and still believed that family meant equal love. My name is Jessica, and this is the story of how my parents taught me independence by refusing to pay for my college while funding my sister's entire future, and how that lesson led to the most shocking revelation at Sarah's wedding reception. It was October of my senior year, and our dining room had that warm, golden glow that only happens when Mom lights all the good candles. Family photos lined the mantelpiece. Vacations to Yellowstone, Sarah's dance recitals, my academic award ceremonies. Everything looked perfect from the outside, just like it always had in our middle-class suburban home. "Jessica, honey, pass the potatoes," Dad said, cutting into his pot roast. "We need to talk about your college plans." I felt that familiar flutter of excitement and anxiety. Sarah, 3 years younger, looked up from her phone with mild interest. This was the conversation I'd been waiting for, the one where we'd finally discuss the college fund I'd glimpsed on Dad's computer screen months earlier. "I've been accepted to State University and 3 private colleges," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The guidance counselor says I have a real shot at some good scholarships, but we'll still need to cover about $15,000 a year, even at State." Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks, the kind that passes between parents who've already had the real conversation without you. "Well," Mom began, her voice taking on that carefully modulated tone she used for difficult subjects. "Your father and I have been discussing this, and we think this is a perfect opportunity for you to learn independence." The word hit me like a small stone thrown into still water, creating ripples of confusion. "Independence?" I repeated. "You've always been so capable, Jessica," Dad continued, his chest puffing out with what seemed like pride. "So mature for your age. We believe you're strong enough to find your own way through college. It'll build character." I looked across the table at Sarah, who was now paying attention, her eyes wide. "But what about the college fund? I saw it on your computer. There's money set aside." Another look passed between my parents, this one sharper, more uncomfortable. "That fund," Mom said slowly, "is for emergencies and, well, different children have different needs." "What does that mean?" "It means," Dad said, leaning forward with that earnest expression he wore when he wanted to sound wise, "that we have complete faith in your ability to earn scholarships, get student loans, work part-time. You're going to thank us for this someday." Shh! The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across the family photos, and for the first time, I noticed something I'd never seen before. In every single picture, Sarah was front and center, while I stood slightly to the side, smiling but somehow separate. "But Sarah's only a sophomore," I said, my voice smaller now. "What about when she goes to college?" The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Mom finally said. "Every child is different." That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. I'd maintained a 4.2 GPA, been captain of the debate team, volunteered at the animal shelter for 3 years, and worked part-time at the local library. I'd done everything right, everything they'd asked of me. So why did doing everything right apparently mean I deserved less support than my sister, who spent most of her time on TikTok and had never held a job? The next few months passed in a blur of scholarship applications and growing tension. Every time I brought up college costs, my parents would launch into speeches about building character and the value of hard work. They seemed genuinely proud of my independence, praising me whenever I figured out another piece of the financial aid puzzle on my own. "Look at our Jessica," Dad would tell relatives, "already so self-sufficient. We raised her right." But then Sarah turned 16, and suddenly the conversations in our house shifted. I was in the kitchen making coffee before school when I heard Mom on the phone with her sister. "Oh yes, we're already starting to look at colleges with Sarah," she was saying. "We want to make sure she has every opportunity. She's more sensitive than Jessica. She'll need more support to find her way." Sensitive. The word lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. When Sarah got her driver's license, she didn't get a hand-me-down car like I had. She got a brand new Honda Civic for safety, my parents explained. When she struggled with algebra, they hired a private tutor without hesitation. When I'd struggled with calculus 2 years earlier, they'd told me to ask my teacher for extra help. You're smart enough to figure it out. Jessica's always been the independent one, became the family refrain. Sarah needs more guidance. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Every achievement I earned through my own effort was praised as evidence of my natural independence. Every challenge Sarah faced was met with immediate parental intervention and support. I was strong enough to handle anything alone. She was precious enough to deserve help. The breaking point came in March, 3 months before graduation. I was sitting at the kitchen table with acceptance letters spread in front of me, trying to calculate loan payments and work-study hours, when Sarah bounded downstairs with her own news. "Mom! Dad! Guess what?" She was practically glowing with excitement. "Mrs. Peterson says if I keep my grades up junior and senior year, I'll definitely get into state university." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said, pulling Sarah into a hug. "And don't you worry about the cost. We'll make sure you have everything you need." The words hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. "Everything she needs?" I asked quietly. Dad looked uncomfortable. "Well, yes. Sarah will need our support to succeed. She's not like you, Jessica. She doesn't have your natural resilience." "My natural resilience," I repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Jessica." Mom's voice carried a warning. "Don't start with that entitled attitude." Entitled. There it was, the word they used whenever I questioned the logic of their decisions. Wanting equal treatment was entitled. Asking for the same support they freely gave my sister was entitled. The college fund that I'd seen on Dad's computer, the one that could easily cover both our educations, was apparently not entitled when it came to Sarah. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I looked up the college fund account on Dad's computer while they were at Sarah's parent-teacher conference. What I found made my hands shake. There was enough money to send both of us to college with money left over. The fund had been growing for years, fed by steady contributions from my grandparents' inheritance and Dad's work bonuses. There was a spreadsheet with projections for Sarah's education costs, detailed plans for her dorm preferences, even a line item for Sarah's car in college. My name appeared exactly once in a note that read, "Jessica, track scholarship progress, encourage independence." I stared at that screen until my eyes burned, finally understanding that this wasn't about building my character or teaching me independence. This was about their belief that I didn't need love demonstrated through action because I was strong enough to love myself. Sarah got support because she was precious. I got praise for not needing support because I was useful. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. "I'm leaving," I announced at breakfast, setting my coffee cup down with a definitive click. Sarah's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "Leaving for where?" "I'm moving out. I'll finish high school from Jake's place." Jake was my boyfriend, whose family had already offered me their guest room when they'd learned about my situation. "I'll work full-time this summer and start at community college in the fall. I'll transfer to state university as a junior." The silence was deafening. "Jessica," Dad said carefully, "don't be dramatic. We've explained our reasoning." "Your reasoning," I interrupted, "is that Sarah deserves financial support because she's sensitive, and I deserve nothing because I'm strong. That's not teaching independence, Dad. That's favoritism with a bow on it." Mom's face flushed red. "How dare you? After everything we've given you. What have you given me?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "The same love you give Sarah? The same support? The same belief that I deserve help when I need it?" "You've never needed help," Mom said. "You've always been so capable." "Because you never gave me a choice." The words erupted from somewhere deep in my chest. I had to be capable because being anything else meant being a disappointment. Do you have any idea what it's like to be praised for not needing the love you're dying to receive? Sarah was crying now, and Dad's jaw was set in that stubborn line that meant the conversation was over. Fine, he said. If you want to throw away everything we've taught you about self-reliance, go ahead. But don't come crawling back when reality hits. I looked around the dining room one last time, at the family photos where I stood slightly apart, at the table where I'd eaten countless meals while being told how proud they were of my independence, at the parents who genuinely believed they were doing right by me. I won't, I said quietly, because the reality you're so worried about, I've been living it for 18 years. The packing took 2 hours. 18 years of life fit into 7 boxes and 3 garbage bags. I left behind my academic awards, hanging on the wall like evidence of my supposed natural resilience. I left behind my childhood photos, embedded in frames that suddenly seemed to tell a different story than the one I'd believed. What I took was my acceptance letter to community college, my work uniforms, and a small framed photo of my grandmother, the only family member who'd ever seemed to see me as someone who deserved care rather than someone who didn't need it. As I loaded the last box into Jake's mom's car, Sarah appeared in the driveway. "Jess, wait," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "I don't understand why you're so angry. Mom and Dad love you." I looked at my little sister, beautiful, sweet Sarah, who'd never had to question whether she deserved support because she'd never been denied it. "I know they do," I said, "but they love you enough to take care of you, and they love me enough to believe I don't need taking care of. Do you see the difference?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Someday you will," I said, getting into the car. "And when you do, I hope you'll understand why I had to leave." As we drove away, I saw Dad watching from the living room window. He raised his hand in a small wave, and I realized he still believed he'd done the right thing. In his mind, I was proving his point about my strength and independence by handling this crisis on my own. He had no idea that strength born from having no other choice isn't strength at all. It's survival. And survival, I was about to learn, could take you places that family love never could. The thing about survival is that it teaches you lessons your family never could. 9 years of building a life from scratch will either break you or forge you into something unrecognizable. I chose to be forged. The first year was brutal. Community college classes during the day, restaurant shifts at night, and weekends spent at Jake's family's house trying to pretend I belonged somewhere. His mom, Mrs. Patterson, would make an extra plate at dinner and act like it wasn't charity. His dad would slip me $20 bills for gas when my car started making that grinding noise I couldn't afford to fix. "You know," Mrs. Patterson said one evening as I helped with dishes, "real family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up." I cried in their guest bathroom that night, not from sadness, but from the revelation that love could be simple. No conditions, no tests of strength, no praise for not needing what everyone deserves. Just presence. The breakthrough came during my second year when my psychology professor, Dr. Martinez, noticed me staying after every class to ask questions. "Jessica," she said one afternoon, "have you considered that your interest in family dynamics might be more than academic?" That conversation led to my first therapy session with Dr. Chen, a soft-spoken woman who specialized in family trauma. I remember sitting in her office surrounded by plants and warm lighting, insisting that my family wasn't abusive. "They love me," I kept saying. "They just believe in independence." "Tell me about a time you felt truly supported by them," she asked. I sat there for 10 minutes, cycling through memories of praise for my achievements, pride in my self-sufficiency, admiration for my strength. But support? Actual? Tangible? "I've got your back" support? "I can't," I finally whispered. That's when Dr. Chen introduced me to terms I'd never heard: golden child, scapegoat, emotional neglect disguised as character building. She helped me understand that my parents' narrative about my natural independence was actually a sophisticated form of gaslighting that had trained me to be grateful for receiving less. "The cruelest form of rejection," she said, "is being told you're too strong to need love." The anger came next, waves of it that surprised me with their intensity. I was furious at 18 years of being told I should be grateful for scraps, furious at being praised for achievements that came from desperation rather than encouragement, furious at Sarah for accepting support I'd never been offered and somehow making me feel guilty for resenting it. But anger, Dr. Chen taught me, was just grief wearing a disguise. I was mourning the childhood I'd never had, the unconditional support I'd never received, the version of myself that might have existed if I'd been loved without conditions. Your parents weren't preparing you for independence, she said during one session. They were teaching you to expect less so they could give more to your sister without feeling guilty. The work was slow and painful. I had to unlearn the belief that needing help made me weak. I had to practice asking for support from Jake's family, from professors, from friends I was slowly allowing myself to make. I had to accept that my worth wasn't tied to my ability to handle everything alone. Meanwhile, my grades soared. When you're not spending emotional energy wondering why you're not enough, you can focus on becoming everything you want to be. I transferred to State University with a 4.0 GPA and a full scholarship. I started a work-study job in the psychology department, began undergraduate research on family dynamics, and for the first time in my life, felt like I was living rather than just surviving. Contact with my family dwindled to holiday cards and brief phone calls. They'd ask how school was going, and I'd give polite updates. They never asked if I needed anything, and I never offered information about my struggles or successes. It was like we were all performing a play where everyone knew their lines, but no one understood the plot. Sarah graduated high school, and, as promised, my parents paid for everything. Her dorm room, her meal plan, her books, her sorority fees. Everything I'd been told would build character if I had to earn it myself. She called me once during her freshman year, drunk and crying. "Jess, I miss you," she sobbed. "Mom and Dad never talk about you anymore. It's like you just disappeared." "I'm still here," I said. "I've just stopped waiting for them to notice." By my senior year, I'd been accepted into graduate programs at 3 universities. Dr. Chen and I were working on forgiveness, not the kind that excuses behavior, but the kind that frees you from carrying other people's choices like stones in your pockets. Forgiveness, she said, isn't about them deserving it. It's about you deserving peace. I graduated summa cum laude. My parents came to the ceremony and took photos, praising my independence and self-sufficiency. Jake's family threw me a party and cried when I gave my speech about chosen family and the people who teach you what love actually looks like. Graduate school brought research opportunities that connected me to the broader world of family therapy and trauma recovery. I published papers, presented at conferences, and slowly built a reputation in my field. My professors became mentors, then colleagues, then friends who invited me to dinner parties and included me in their family's celebrations. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become an expert in healthy family dynamics by studying everything mine wasn't. By the time I finished my master's degree, I was working as a family therapist at a clinic that specialized in helping young adults navigate complex family relationships. My clients were kids like me, the ones who'd been told they were too strong to need support, too independent to deserve help, too capable to require love demonstrated through action. "Your parents taught you to be grateful for emotional starvation," I told one client, a young man whose family had pulled college funding because he'd chosen art over business. "That's not strength training. That's abuse disguised as pedagogy." I watched him cry the same tears I'd cried in Dr. Chen's office, mourning the childhood that prioritized performance over belonging. My practice grew. I specialized in what I privately called independence trauma, the specific damage done to children who are praised for not needing what they desperately want. I wrote articles, spoke at conferences, and built a reputation as someone who understood the particular cruelty of being told you're too strong for tenderness. The breakthrough in my career came when I developed a therapeutic framework for adults recovering from emotional differentiation abuse, my term for families who use independence rhetoric to justify unequal treatment. The research was groundbreaking, the applications were widespread, and suddenly I found myself being invited to speak at national conferences. I was 32 when the wedding invitation arrived. Sarah was getting married to someone named David Chen, and yes, I noticed immediately that he shared my therapist's last name. The invitation was elegant, cream-colored with gold lettering, and included a handwritten note from Sarah. "Jess, I know it's been a long time, but I can't imagine getting married without my sister there. Please come, we need to talk. Love, Sarah." I stared at that invitation for weeks. Part of me wanted to throw it away and continue building my life without the complications of family drama, but Dr. Chin, my Dr. Chin, not Sarah's fiancé, encouraged me to consider it. "You've done the work," she said. "You know who you are now. This could be an opportunity to see your family from your new perspective. Not as someone seeking their approval, but as someone who's already found it in healthier places." So I RSVP'd, yes. The wedding was at a country club I'd never seen before, the kind of place my parents had started frequenting after Dad's promotion and Mom's inheritance from her aunt. Everything was white and gold and perfect, like a magazine spread designed to showcase success. I arrived wearing a dress I'd bought with money from my private practice, driving a car I'd purchased without needing anyone's co-signature, carrying confidence earned through years of therapy and professional achievement. I wasn't the 18-year-old who'd left home with 7 boxes and a broken heart. I was someone else entirely. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah looked radiant in a dress that probably cost more than my first year's rent. David seemed nervous but happy, a tall man with kind eyes who kept looking at Sarah like she was the answer to questions he'd been afraid to ask. During the reception, I mingled politely with relatives who seemed surprised I existed. Apparently, my parents had been vague about my whereabouts for the past 9 years. "Oh, Jessica's doing her own thing," was how they'd explained my absence from family gatherings. I was at the bar when Mom approached me. "Jessica, honey, you look wonderful," she said, her voice carrying that bright tone she used when she wanted to pretend everything was normal. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Thank you for including me," I said neutrally. "Of course we included you. Your family." She paused, studying my face. "Though I have to say I'm surprised you came. You've been so distant lately. As if 9 years of minimal contact was a recent development." "I've been building a life," I said. "It's kept me busy." Before she could respond, Dad appeared with Sarah and David in tow. "Jessica!" Dad's voice boomed with the enthusiasm he'd always reserved for public displays of family unity. "Come meet our new son-in-law." I shook David's hand, noting his firm grip and direct eye contact. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. "David, this is our older daughter," Dad continued. "The independent one. She's been off doing her own thing for years." "Doing her own thing," I repeated softly, tasting the phrase that had apparently summarized my entire adult life in family conversations. David's expression shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. "What kind of work do you do, Jessica?" he asked. "I'm a family therapist," I said. "I specialize in helping young adults recover from complex family dynamics." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. "That's interesting," Mom said carefully. "I didn't know you'd gone into therapy." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said, and for the first time I felt no need to soften the observation. The conversation moved on, but I noticed David watching me with increasing intensity. When Sarah was pulled away by other relatives, he approached me again. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Did you write the paper on independence trauma in family systems? The one published in the Journal of Family Psychology last year?" I nodded, surprised he'd heard of it. "And the conference presentation on emotional differentiation abuse at the American Family Therapy Academy?" "That was me." David's face went pale. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Sarah told me about her sister who left home for college and never came back. She said you'd always been the strong, independent one who didn't need family support." He looked across the room at my parents, then back at me. She had no idea what she was actually describing. The wedding wound down with the usual traditions: cake cutting, bouquet tossing, tearful goodbyes. I was getting ready to leave when Sarah found me in the lobby. "Jess, wait," she said, still in her wedding dress, but looking suddenly younger, uncertain. "Can we talk?" We sat in the hotel lounge, Sarah still glowing with wedding happiness but her eyes serious. "David told me about your work," she said. "About the papers you've written." I waited. "I never understood," she continued. "When we were kids, I thought Mom and Dad were just recognizing that we were different. I thought they were meeting our individual needs." "And now?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Now I'm wondering if I got what I needed because you weren't allowed to need anything." It was the first time anyone in my family had ever acknowledged the disparity in how we'd been treated. "I'm getting married," she said, her voice small. "And I don't know how to be a wife because I've never learned how to function without someone taking care of everything for me. David's already talking about budgets and shared responsibilities, and I realized I've never even balanced my own checkbook." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I got all the support, but you got all the skills. They prepared you for life by forcing you to live it. They prepared me for life by protecting me from it." We sat in silence, two sisters finally seeing the same childhood from both sides. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I got the love you deserved. I'm sorry I never questioned it. I'm sorry I let them make me believe you preferred being alone." I reached over and took her hand. This woman who'd been my sister all along, but whom I'd never really known. "You were a kid too," I said. "You didn't choose any of this, but I benefited from it." "Yes, you did." Sarah nodded, accepting the weight of that truth. "Can you teach me?" she asked. "How to be independent? How to build a life instead of just waiting for someone else to build it for me?" I smiled for the first time all day. That's exactly what families should do. As I drove home that night, I thought about the conversation I'd had with David before leaving. He'd pulled me aside, his face still pale from his earlier realization. "I want you to know," he'd said, "that I see what happened to you. I understand what Sarah's family stories actually mean. And I want you to know that in our family, Sarah's and mine, you'll never be the missing piece. You'll be the piece that makes everything else make sense." I'd cried then, standing in the lobby of a country club where my parents were celebrating their daughter's wedding, while finally beginning to understand what they'd lost when they taught their other daughter that she was too strong to need love. The drive home took me past the old neighborhood, past the house where I'd learned that family could mean both everything and nothing, depending on which child you were. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I had built something better than what I'd left behind. I had built a life where strength didn't disqualify me from tenderness, where independence didn't mean isolation, where being capable didn't mean being alone. I had built a family of choice from therapists and mentors and friends who showed up. I had built a career from the ashes of my childhood, transforming pain into purpose and helping other people find their way out of similar darkness. And now, finally, I had a sister who wanted to learn how to build something too. The missing piece, it turned out, had never been missing at all. It had just been busy becoming whole.